Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to be talking about the North Node. This is the point of intersection between the cycles of the moon and the cycles of the sun. It's a nominal point, but in evolutionary astrology, it's a critical influence. The North Node is said to represent our future destiny. The South Node, which is the polar opposite, is said to be our past karma. Now, the North Node is set to move on the 5th of May at 7 a.m. UCT, Universal Central Time, into the sign of Gemini. Now, it's going to be there through till January the 18th, 2022. So we will have the North Node in the sign of Gemini and the South Node in the sign of Sagittarius. So when did this last happen? Well, the nodal return occurs every 18.6 years. So the last time that this particular North Node transit occurred was between October the 13th, 2001 and April the 13th, 2003. So what happened in those intervening years last time that may call out to us as having a kind of Gemini influence, being very much to do with communications, to do with quick thinking, to do with technology? Well, Windows XP was released in the autumn or the fall of 2001, and also an international treaty on cybercrime. So that was fascinating. We also had China joining the World Trade Organization as an official body, and also the SARS virus, which is incredible, isn't it, with what we're dealing with at the moment. That came into play also in 2002 in China. But in 2003 we had the Iraq War, but in a more positive context, if you want to think about international cooperation, 5 countries joined the European Union in the guise of Malta, Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia, and also the Czech Republic. Now that just depends on your personal view on Europe, but I see that as being a sign of international cooperation, which comes, of course, from the South Node, the energy of Sagittarius, which is very much to do with international affairs. So I think the first thing to identify is that the North Node in the sign of Gemini is not going to be working in isolation. It is a polar axis known as the nodal axis. So if we look at this chart, which I prepared for this event, you can see the North Node is at 29 degrees 59 in Gemini, and it's in retrograde. It also goes in the opposite direction of this nominal point to the planets. And so you can see on the other side of the heavens, we have the South Node in Sagittarius. And they do work together. And they don't necessarily impose upon us a set of influences. It's more like a guiding pull, a kind of almost a gravitational, emotional pull, because the nodes are very much to do with the moon. Now they can be to do with past karma, and that's said to be the South Node. And these are the things we're very familiar with, the things that we're very welded to. And the North Node is an opportunity for us over the next 18 months to try to grow, to emerge from some of the passive alignment that we have to the South Node, which I think in the sign of Sagittarius is free travel, or free, should I say, the freedom to travel, but also cheap travel, particularly by air, very Sagittarius. We also have the fact that the planet Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini, is very much to do with communication and travel, but in Sagittarius is in detriment. Interesting, isn't it, that we're now hitting this situation where we're all going to become much more conscious that moving around in the world is not going to be such a straightforward thing. So Gemini energy, on the other hand, is very much about moving around in our immediate environment or connecting with our immediate environment. So it can be to do, for example, more walking, more cycling. It can be to do with more sudden bursts of physical exercise. And of course it can be to do with communicating with our neighbours, our community, our siblings. Now the fascinating thing about this day chart, and as you will know if you've tuned into my forecasts and analyses before, is that I like to look at the overall circumstances of a particular event. So when the North Node enters Gemini, we also have on the universal central time an ascendant in Gemini, which is conjunct Venus, the planet of attraction, which is obviously in the sign of a Gemini, very much to do with quick-wittedness, but that's also still in a very positive alliance with Mars. And in this chart, Mars is really right at the top of the chart in quite an assertive area. And I think that assertiveness is going to be about sharing of information, collaboration, networking, a lot to do with technology. And I think that this North Node will see a lot more to do with technology coming in the fight back with COVID, for example. And of course there are sort of moral and ethical questions about tracing apps which have been developed in the past, and if we're honest about it, virtually every app we join will try to find out where we're located, and has done for years, and it's up to us to sort of prevent that happening. But at the end of the day, the kind of genie has escaped the bottle a little bit when it comes to this kind of personal data. But there may be some people who will be resistant to the database building, which is very Gemini, that can come from alertness to when we might be quite close to someone who's had some kind of exposure to the virus. But of course, the world is not just about COVID-19, although it may seem like that a lot at this time. But I do feel the North Node is going to be an opportunity for us all to learn a lot more. Now, learning in our home environment is something that a lot of us have really grappled with in the last few weeks and months, as we've had much more constraint over our personal freedoms. And I think that can be a very positive thing, whether it's learning a language, whether it's learning about how to play a musical instrument, whether it's writing a blog, whether it's spending time constructing a novel, which we may have had some excitement about that's been in the back of our mind for some while, but events haven't really given us the time and space to really focus on it. So these kinds of communication are all very, very positive. So over the next 18 months, I think we're going to see quite a lot of extra energy around that kind of technology-led but at home based learning. But the other thing that really fascinates me is since 2016, when we had the new moon in Gemini, which forged a mutable ground cross, which included Jupiter and Neptune at that time, the whole concept of fake news has really become quite a big deal. And I think we are going to see a real kickback against this kind of stuff, particularly as Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius. Obviously Saturn's in Aquarius at the moment, as you can see, but will be returning to Capricorn on the 2nd of July. But Jupiter moves into Aquarius along with Saturn at the end of this year, Saturn the 17th of December, Jupiter the 20th, and then they're together through to about the end of the first week of January 2021. And I think we're going to see a pushback against this concept that certain elements of shared media and resources is where people can have an opinion that may not be particularly fact-checked, whereas licensed newspapers and magazines and TV outlets and radio outlets are all governed by some kind of official body to make sure that their output is fair and truthful. So I do feel that this North Node, which is very much to do with where we can aspire to. So it's like embracing a higher part of ourselves, could see much more global connected pull towards finding the essential facts of situations, rather than being swayed necessarily by this kind of Sagittarius big picture stuff, which is very much, or potentially can be to do with dogma. So it can be very much to do with belief systems based on, well, I think it's good to be this, I think it's good to be that, but not necessarily verified in or validated in any way. So I feel that we're going to see a much greater emphasis towards fact checking, and because Facebook itself is actually an Aquarius entity, once Saturn returns to the Sun on Facebook's chart, which is going to be in 2022, I think you're going to see that there's going to be a pushback against people like Facebook, who kind of say, well, people are entitled to have an opinion even if it's not true. But that's very destructive to what the more spiritual elements of truth is. When someone is truthful with us, there's something very ennobling about it. We kind of know it instinctively. We also know when people are not being truthful, particularly politicians, when they dissemble, they don't answer questions directly, they avoid and evade. And that's something that I think we all find very frustrating. And one of the things that political leadership needs to do, I feel, on the back of this nodal axis, is to take the best of Sagittarius, which can be about higher truths, spirituality, philosophy, and bind it into the everyday program of connection with others that can come through news outlets, through briefings. So we may see a bit of a pushback. A much more Aquarius vibration is going to develop, if not so much this year, or not until later this year, certainly into next year. Well, I feel that people are going to be held much more to account for their statements, because we all know that politicians in particular, and sometimes business people, very large businesses, can get away, it would seem, with things. There doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability. So I think this nodal axis, in terms of the global stage, is going to see a push towards this kind of higher truth. Now, how will it play out in our personal situation? Well, it does depend on where you have the nodal axis in your natal horoscope. If you want to discover this, I've created a diagram which is underneath this video, and you can just go to your year of birth and you'll be able to see for yourself where your north and south nodes are. Now, the typical thing that people often say in astrology is the south node is kind of what you're escaping from, and the north node is your kind of future destiny. Now, my north node is in Scorpio, which is very much to do with spirituality, and because the south node is in Taurus, which is more to do with the sort of material plane, potentially. So it's said that my life is very much to do with the more spiritual side of the world. And because it's in the first house, which is very Aries, it's like finding its way. So to find out which pairing you have, please look beneath this video. And then if you want to investigate that further, please also, you can buy a natal horoscope from me and get 30% off if you have a year forecast. Again, seeing the link beneath this video to see how your north node connects to other parts of your chart. For example, if you have a north node that connects very well to Mercury, you have a very acute instinct of where trends are going in society. If you have a north node which is attached in some way to Saturn, it could be that you have some blockages or inhibitions in order to progress around the nodal direction of your life. It's also true to say that for some people, this north node moving into Cancer, if their north node is, say for example, the first degree of Virgo or the first degree of Pisces, they will have a square, and that can be a challenging period over the next year and a half, depending exactly when the point is in the cycle of the quarter, the square, going through the transit as this goes on over the next 18 months. So the nodal axis is very, very exciting. It's very, very influential. I do think because it's been going through the sign of Cancer over the last year and a half, it's been asking us to balance the more material, practical and substantial energies of the South Node in Capricorn with the more homely, nurturing and protective energies, particularly of the planet in the sign of Cancer. So you can see they should work in cooperation. They're not mutually exclusive. So I feel that there has been a failure in that regard, because I think that the pandemic does come in essence from our attitudes to moving around freely in the world, to some attitudes towards what people eat in China, but also, there has been some talk of some lab work that's gone on there that may have had some impact on this, and I think the jury is a little bit out on that. Some people may have very profound views that there has been some kind of conspiracy. My reading of it is there may have been something that's gone wrong as opposed to a deliberate act. That, I think, is entirely possible. But we also have the effect of global warming. So we can see, I was watching a programme last night about turtles, and the amount of plastic that they're ingesting in the Mediterranean is just absolutely shocking. And this kind of stuff was where we're not getting the practical action right with Capricorn South Node, together with the North Node direction of travel for us all, also known as the point of destiny, the North Node. Well, I think in the sign of Gemini and with the South Node in Sagittarius, we have an opportunity to clean up our act around communication, around philosophy, around the expression of ideas, about being more truthful, about seeing that travel comes at a huge cost to the planet, that it might in time see people go back onto cruise ships, for example, but what are the impacts of cruise ships on the environment in terms of the particulates that they emit from their funnels? They're awful things in that kind of regard. So we can have these enjoyable things again, but I think there has to be much greater value placed on them. Therefore, they're likely to be a lot more expensive. And I think we all have to come to terms with that we won't be moving around so freely as we have in the past. So therefore, we have to get used to being in our own localities much more frequently, which is very much to do with Gemini. So it's finding a way to make this work. So it's a new beginning for us. This first house energy on this particular chart is very Gemini-like. We have Venus there, which is in shadow already before it goes into its retrograde. And so there is a square also with Neptune, so we can still see there's going to be misinterpretation, misunderstandings, there's going to be potentially misconceptions and manipulation of news. I think that's quite likely. But in this particular chart, we also have Venus in a quincunx with Pluto, which is kind of saying to us again, and Pluto in the 9th house of travel, international affairs, what we want comes at a cost. There is some traction. If we want these things, there is some kind of value to them that we have to take much more seriously. So I think anything to do with travel, we're going to see some huge advances in the next 18 months around electric cars, I feel, which can be very, very positive. An electric bus drove past me the other day. Boy, it was just so quiet, but lovely to have something so large going by where we didn't have all that lungful of carbon going down my throat. So these kind of technologies are going to be coming in big time, particularly this year. I feel we're going to see much more to do with the sharing of information, especially around the apps and so on. So for us all, it's about trying to get a better state of affairs in our localities, in our community, our connectivity with others, not living in such an aloof and detached way, which I think was very Capricorn, Cancer, being hunkered down in our ever more lovely homes, but not so aware of what's outside of them. So I think it's all about our connectivity to others, and that's really going to mark our journey and our potential to grow as human beings and to develop over the next 18 months. So please see below for that table to see your own nodal axis for the year you were born. If you'd like to connect with me directly, you can do so through Twitter at Horoscope Ace. You can also click beneath to join up with my monthly newsletter, which is magazine, which is free, or to get your 3 daily horoscope. Or please join Elisa and I daily on our daily astrology and tarot overview, which is proving very popular to give short, insightful understanding of what the astrology is for that day, and also her use of tarot, angel and oracle cards to give a more spiritual dimension. But for now, please stay safe, good luck and goodbye.